Hey y'all, it's Struggle. So, this was a story from my third deployment. For those who don't know me, I was a gunner on the AC-130. And at the time, all the gunships were up at Bagram Air Force Base in Afghanistan. I don't know if that's the case anymore. This was years ago. But we had a mission in southern Afghanistan. And the one thing you need to know about gunships is we always fly pretty much close to, or at least the AC-130U, the variant I was on, flies pretty much close to our max weight. We end up going a little bit under that when we end up like wasting fuel, but for the most part, we're pretty close to that all the time. So we're in southern Afghanistan. We do our op, we check off, and this is several hours of flight between our op and our main base, Bagram Air Force Base. So we're having to drive across the country. So we pick up gas along the way, and we get back up to that max weight, and then we're transiting over the Hindu Kush mountain range. Just to paint the scene a little bit, I'm going to use as much images as I can find here. In the front, the very front, there's the cockpit where the pilot, co-pilot would be, and the engineer. After that, we called it Flight Station 245, but just basically after the cockpit, we had the crew rest compartment and the right scanner window. I was flying right scanner this night. We would rotate, all the gunners would rotate the crew positions on the gun deck. So, one night I'd be right scanner, one night I'd be in the lead gun, which would be after the 105, and we'd rotate forward until we had gone through all the positions. So this night I was in the right scanner window. This is early morning. We had flown our night mission, and the sun was starting to come up. And I'm going to tell the story a little bit out of order, but I'll keep going with after the crew rest compartment in the right scanner window, there's the Battle Management Center. And the Battle Management Center is where all the tactical crew guys are. And then we have the gun deck that runs from Flight Station 245 all the way to the actual cargo ramp. So after a mission, typically the TAC crew that were in the Battle Management Center, they had to be in there the entire time over the op. Very few exceptions where those guys would be allowed out of there over an op. So they would usually wait until an op had ended to go take their bathroom breaks, stretch their legs, get some food. Because we had some MREs that were usually kept in boxes outside of the Battle Management Center. So our fire control officer had checked off, and he'd gone back to the bathroom, and he was talking with the lead gun off comms. So I'm in the right scanner window. I'm listening to our main channel for comms, and I have it turned all the way up. Usually, I won't say usually. It depends on the gunner. Usually, I had main turned down pretty low unless I was in the lead gunner position or in the right scanner position. But the lead gun's back there. He's got his headset partially off because he's having a conversation with the fire control officer who's off comms. I don't know about what, but so he's trying to hear this guy. He's talking, basically with him over the engines. The sounds on the plane were pretty deafening. So he's basically back there screaming with this dude, having a conversation. And I'm up here in the right scanner window, and I honestly hadn't paid attention to this guy checking off comms. But about that point, I hear on main, the engineers start talking about how he's getting some weird indications on the number 3 engine. So the number 3 engine was actually on the right side where I was on the right scanner. It's actually the inboard engine, the closest to the aircraft. And of course I'm paying attention to this because, I'm an aviator, and also there's this big thing called the prop line right behind me. So I'm always worried when I was in the right scanner position that if the propeller flew off, that it would just come in and slice through where I'm sitting, basically. So I'm paying attention to this. He's saying that the RPMs are acting weird on the number 3 engine, and that he thinks that we're starting to lose it. The pilots are going back and forth. The aircraft commander, the main pilot, is talking to him. He's like, "Well, can we keep it? Can we keep it? We're over the mountain range. Can we keep it for a little while?" The engine's like, "No, we're losing it. It's fluctuating. It's going down." And he's like, "All right, fine, hold on." And he pulls back on the yoke to get us into this huge spike in altitude, which was a very aggressive maneuver for an AC-130 gunship. Like I said, we flew max weight most of the time. So he pulls back on this yoke, and as I mentioned, the fire control officer back there had been off comms. So you get these negative G's, and these guys just basically start floating up into the air, And obviously I'm in the right scanner window. I'm getting a little bit of a floating maneuver because we're going up. At least when I was getting that, it was just I was getting pressed back into the seat. And so the pilot we must have gone up 1,000 feet in a few seconds. it was, like I said, it was aggressive. He just goes straight up with it, and then he pushes back on the yoke, like aggressive again. And the only reason I don't know like entirely too much about actual flying the aircraft, but I assume what he would do was what he was doing was he was getting as much of the inertia off of that engine that was dying out of it as he could, and then when he went forward to go down, it was so that he hadn't bled off all the energy from it, and that he could use what we little had left, to like start pushing and maintain the altitude we had just gotten. So all I hear all of a sudden is just this screaming. And as I said, the plane was really loud. So I heard screaming coming all the way from the back of the gun deck, and I actually heard it a lot over Gunner ISO, because Gunner ISO wasn't one of the comms that you actually had to press the button to actually communicate. It just came over naturally. And so I hear it both from the screaming all the way from the back of the gun deck, and also over ISO. About this time, I'm seeing why the pilot had made this decision to make this aggressive gain in altitude. This big fucking peak in the middle of the Hindu Kush mountain range just basically comes out of nowhere in my field of view in the right scanner window, because I couldn't see forward. I could only see from like a certain position to another certain position. And I see this peak, and it's only about maybe 300 feet below us. And it felt, honestly, it was the closest I've been to an object while flying that high. It honestly felt like I could reach out and touch the top of the peak. And so I'm feeling like I can reach out and touch this mountain. I'm hearing screaming. I have no idea what's going on back there yet. But we clear the peak, and that's about the time the pilot comes over, and he's like, "Is everyone okay? I'm sorry about that." And the lead gun comes back, and he says over comms, is like, "Hey, the FOCO back here is really hurt." So to lay it out a little bit more, the gun deck itself was a flat plane. The cargo ramp was kind of like a 45-degree angle. So the fire control officer, when he was talking to the lead gun's after the 105, he's standing on the cargo ramp. And so the FOCO apparently had been in kind of like a Captain Morgan position, where his foot was kind of like one leg was on the ramp and one was on the gun deck. And so when we had basically done that and we got those negative G's, he'd flown up, and when the pilot straightened out, he basically came smacking down on his one leg. And he had basically shattered all the bones below his knee. I'll flash forward just a little bit, but so we cleared the mountain range, and we're coming to Bagram. We're declaring an IFE. We want to get down on the ground immediately because we have a hurt dude. And the entire time, this guy's just fucking screaming back there. We finally get him up on comms. We get him a cord. Like we immediately regretted that, because he just started. He was still screaming into it, so we took him back off of it. And the lead gun like calmed this guy down. He's like, "Hey, if you're gonna be on comms, we need you on comms, but you need to stop screaming." And he's like, "Can you give me anything for the pain?" And I'm like up there in the right scanner window. I'm like, I can bust open one of these first aid kits. And he's like, "Yeah, do it. What is in it?" Turns out all we had in the first aid kit was like fucking Tylenol. The days of having like morphine in those first aid kits had obviously gone away. I was like, "We got some fucking Tylenol in here. I can fucking grab that for you." And he's like, "Fuck, no, I'll take it, but shit." And so we're trying to communicate. We're coming in for our landing, at Bagram Air Force Base, and the pilot's like, "Where's the FOCO? Get him to the crew rest compartment." And the lead gun tries to pick this dude up, and immediately this dude's like screaming. He's like, "No, don't move me. I'm too hurt for that." And so the lead gun asked the pilot, like, "Hey, can I just I'll bear hug this dude on the cargo ramp, and we'll just try to make it an easy landing for this guy." And the pilot's, "I'll do what I can." So we're coming in for this landing, and this guy's just bear hugging this dude on the ramp because we can't get him to an actual seat because his leg's just too broken. And we hit the runway, we bounce a little bit. That's not uncommon, but if you ever seen any of those 90s action movies where they're driving and for whatever reason they're skidding in, trying to almost not hit a building or something like that, and the people are screaming, ah, as they're about to hit it, and it only gets more aggressive. That's kind of what this was with this guy, this FOCO in the back who was screaming. It was why that came to my mind while we were doing this is ridiculous. I don't know why it did, but it's always stuck with me that I thought it was like that, like a 90s action movie with this dude screaming while we're coming to a full stop. Because when you're coming to a full stop after landing, you know, it's a little bit aggressive with the brakes and everything. So we finally get off of the actual main runway. We go over to our taxi position, and we have, you know, fire trucks and ambulances there to greet us. And the entire time, like, I'm just out of it because, like, what can I do from the right scanner window? I have to be in that position. I can't really go back there and help these guys with this. So I finally get a chance once we got to our actual parking spot to, like, get off comms and go back there and see what was up. And, you know, sure enough, he's still on the ramp. And the ambulance guys are getting onto the plane. I'm like, hey, can I help with anything? Lee Gunn's like, no, we've all got this. So I just start cleaning up the back of the air, just policing everything, you know, putting the bags back. You know, I don't know if we shot that night, but if we had, I was probably gathering brass, rolling up patch cords, stuff like that. So the ambulances get the FOCO off the plane, and, you know, everyone's a little shooken up, you know. It's not very often that we have to deal with like a major injury on the plane like that, and we'd always made the first deployment guys, people who were on their first trip, basically drive the crew, you know, drive the van or whatever we had, like a van, bus. So we had a first tripper who was on the gun deck. He was a gunner, and he went and he grabbed the vehicle and he came back, and I get into the passenger seat with him, the front passenger seat, and I look over, and this guy is like white knuckle gripping the steering wheel. And I look at him, I'm like, dude, it's a fucking broken leg. Like, chill the fuck out. But, I mean, obviously, he was probably also shooken up about the fact we lost an engine, we almost hit a mountain, you know, this dude broke his leg. But I was trying to, like, maybe normalize the situation for him, maybe snap him out a little bit. And when he didn't recognize me, because he really was, like, fucking 1,000-yard stare, white knuckle gripping the fucking steering wheel, I just fucking slapped him. I'm like, get the fuck out of the driver's seat, I'll fucking drive, just calm down. And we switched positions. That was actually kind of a weird trip. We actually ended up going through 3 fire control officers. One guy, he just didn't fit in with the crew, and basically pulled some strings to get off of it. He said his back was broken, but it's more of the fact that, like, he didn't fit in with the crew dynamic, and he ended up trying to just get out of it. And that the guy that broke his leg was his replacement, his backfill, and then we broke. So we basically also earned the nickname that trip, FOCO Killers, because we went through 3 of them. And we get back home station a couple months later, and I see this guy who had broken his leg on this trip, and he's still on crutches. This has been quite a long period of time between them. And, you know, I asked him, what's up? I was like, how's your leg? And he's like, I still don't have a lot of feeling in it. Still causes me a lot of pain. As far as I know, like, that never really got better for him. But the goofiest part of this story, I think, is that the Air Force Times or the Herbert Field publication, like the magazine that they made for AFSOC, had come through, and some Air Force journalist had basically made a big old fucking article and basically made a fucking piss take for the fucking article, like a clickbaity title. It was like, you know, fire control officer gets caught with his pants down, because he had gone back to the bathroom and then broke his leg. They made it sound in the article like he had been, like, actually going to the bathroom and then broke his leg, when in actuality he had gone to the bathroom and then was talking with the lead gun. But I don't know, man. Just a goofy story all around. It's not the only time I lost an engine on the aircraft, but it was definitely one of the weirdest, just because of how close we were to a mountain when it happened, and, you know, the guy's leg breaking. So it's always been one of those stories when I don't tell most of the other engine loss stories just because I don't find them that interesting. But this one was certainly weird. If you really want to know what, like, the actual issue with that engine was, why we lost it, it was like a bleed air issue. For anyone who's actually, you know, interested in aviation, it was a bleed air issue that caused us to lose that engine. Other than that, thanks for sticking around and watching this. If you want to support me and my channel, I've got a Patreon now. Don't feel obligated. I appreciate you all watching and subscribing. And as always, you know, peace out.